presentation here, maybe through some main points. The first is the aim of this presentation. So the aim is to evaluate, to assess the relevance of liberal regulatory institutional environment with regard to financial instability or stability of our market economy. So, in order to make this work, make this assessment, I'll try to study briefly here the link between the process of financial development and emerging market economies crisis, as well as the last ongoing 2007-2008 crisis of the developed world. So the result of this study will be, as I have tried to show it here, will be that monetary and financial problems do not lie really only in the way that economic fragilities are generated in the transition process of emerging markets, but rather in the way liberalized economies work. So the main problem is the liberalization, not the transition. And the statement, the final statement, will be that the financial instabilities are a kind of result of endogenous problems of financialized economies. Not a kind of natural outcome of the transition process, but the endogenous result of our liberal market. So to do all this, I will show, first of all, I will recall, first of all, the standard assertion on which the economics profession rests its main explanations of the working of market economies and then of the difficulties that this working will generate. So the standard assertion is what we call usually the Washington consensus. I can call it the Washington consensus number 1, because you know there are a lot of consensus of Washington number 1, number 2, number 3, the new consensus, etc., with some cosmetic change in the foundational theoretical foundations of these explanations. So the Washington consensus and after crisis avatars of this consensus, liberal consensus, tell us that the open, free, liberalized markets are necessary structural transformations in order to lead emerging markets or underdeveloped and developing economies toward more strength, toward more sound economies. So this means also that the structural transformation must lead to a kind of developed financial market economy. So what does the financial development mean? So that's the classical statement, as you know, neoclassical, and classical, shortly speaking, statement. Unfortunately, whatever we believe that this statement tries to give us, to set us, the result is that unfortunately, the crises are really recurrent, repeated in the emerging economies as well as in what we call developed markets, such as the last long-lasting crisis of 2007. So, to do this, the work plan that I can suggest here is in a kind of three-time presentation. In the first part, I recall some observations about the conceptual foundations of financial liberalization reports. And in the second part, all these I will need to be brief. Don't worry about it. Okay? So the second part is about the links between the financial market development process and the emerging market economies and advanced economies crisis. And the third part is about some lessons that we can draw from the emerging markets, for the emerging markets in light of the last 2007 crisis. So first, what about financial development? What does the financial development mean, really? So financial development rests on the statement that, first of all, that the crises that you can observe in emerging markets are mainly transition crises from structurally weak economies in terms of market functioning, structurally weak economies, toward new market structures, new market economies. So this is related to what we know from the basic first year undergraduate course textbooks. This is related to the competitive financial optimal equilibrium models and also to financial repression models of the 60s and 70s with the famous McKinnon, etc. models as well. And the cure that you can propose in order to resolve the problems of transition rests on the importance of mechanisms of open and free markets. So the problem is the transition because of the underdeveloped structures. The cure is the development of these structures, and the development means opening markets, liberalizing markets, and putting the economies on more free market structures. So, you know, all these books and this first year undergraduate textbooks tell all these stories. And these books say that finance stimulates growth because of the efficiency of market allocation mechanisms, the belief that market allocation mechanisms are efficient, of course. And also the liberalization, the opening up of markets must allow economic agents, structures, institutions, and societies to give, at the end of the story, some equilibrium, general equilibrium situation, like the equilibrium between saving and investment, like low interest rates, like the flexibility leading agents to reach equilibrium levels of their decisions and their activities, and so on. So, legal environment, which is required to do this kind of working of structures, is the market-friendly and market competition enhancement processes. These processes are the liberalization processes. So, through all these foundations, basic theoretical foundations, we reach the financial development definition. The financial development means that markets are deep markets. That means that you have diversified products, you have different instruments, different things to cover against risk, but also different instruments to enter into different engagements, financial and political engagements, etc. The second dimension of the financial development is the breadth of the market. Markets are large. That means that the transactions are large. Numerous agents can intervene in the market in order to realize their own individual programs. And the third is the market liquidity, large transactions without any quantitative restriction. There is no barriers to these transactions. Then, to summarize different approaches on the financial development, that's the way of presenting the meaning of financial development shortly. Okay. So, you see here in this presentation, in this definition, you have no stability concern. there is nothing about the financial stability or instability. So now we will try to see why and how you can define financial development without talking about financial stability concept. So the financial development and difficulties in emerging market economies and also in emerging market economies, the developed economies, come mainly from this kind of approach, this kind of belief. So, you know, in the transition process, in the structural change of different developing and emerging markets, you have two kinds of approach. The first is what we call the short-term, let it be, not as said by John Lennon, of course, in another science. Let it be means that let the markets do, because we believe that markets can do. There is no problem. Okay? Short-term. If you let markets do, everything will be okay. And the second approach is the gradual approach. That means that markets need some public intervention in order to improve some inefficiencies, or maybe in order to improve some weakness structurally. Because economies are underdeveloped or developing economies. So they need some structural aid from the public power. So all these two approaches remain liberal approach. There is no problem. They are for market economy. There is no problem. The main difference between is only or rests only on the fact that the first believes that when you let markets do, there will be paradise, final paradise, and the second says, no, you cannot do this. You have to aid markets, help markets to do better. So, in the practice, of course, you have a kind of mix of these two approaches, just for a kind of eclectic implementation of economic policies in transition economies. So, now, what about the financial instability concept? Nothing. Why? Because, as a matter of logic, from the hypothesis of a complex market, from the hypothesis of a market economy works perfectly well without any public constraint or restrictive intervention, that means that you don't need to think and to talk about financial instability because you believe that the economy is fundamentally stable thanks to market mechanics. That's what we teach. Right? So now, if you believe that markets are perfect, why you want to talk about financial instability? Because now markets are liberalized, they must work well. No problem. If there is instability, that must come from other external things, causes, not from the working of the market itself. So you cannot develop financial instability studies if you believe in the markets. So free markets are self-regulatory mechanisms. So you don't need to organize, to implement, to imagine public intervention mechanisms. Because market does not need public intervention to work efficiently. So the regulatory mechanism or regulatory system must be a self-regulatory system. That's the result of the deregulatory or liberalization process since 3 or 4 last decades, since the 70s and 80s. That's a matter of logic. Okay? That's not a political or other kind of choice, a matter of logic. So, macroprudential supervision that rests on public authorities, public intervention, and on the idea, on the principle that markets cannot work well, and then we need intervention. We have to intervene in the markets. So this kind of approach that we call macroprudential supervision is replaced, say, by the 80s, 70s, and 80s, according to each specific country, by a kind of microprudential self-regulatory devices and mechanisms. And the evolution of the system development that I call, evolution of the system of the financial system as well as of our economy is such that, or was such that, and remains now. So, such that we are under the power of what I call here, maybe following some economists like Alpes, etc., or some comportamental behavior finance. What's this? Thank you. Okay. So, under the power of what we can call the limits and cognitive dissonance. That means that we believe in our good existence, even though our existence is very bad. Because if you don't believe in, you cannot continue to live. Okay? You have to change things when you think that things are not good. And changing things is very difficult. That's a just psychological approach, not economic. But it's very useful to understand how people can suicide without thinking about the errors that we generate everything repeatedly. So the story repeats itself because of our repeated errors. And because in part of this kind of limits and cognitive. So that means that also said that this kind of dissonance fuels the expectations, all optimistic expectations about the future. We believe that future will continue to be very, very pleasant, very, very good future. We believe that we will continue to realize big profits thanks to our engagement, speculative engagement. So as said by Chuck Prince, a former CEO of Citibank, while the music continues, we continue to dance. There the music stops, but we don't stop. Never stop before the music stops. Before the crisis, we cannot stop. Even if you know that there will be a big crisis in the near future. So that means that this is a rational behavior. That means that rational individual, micro-individual behavior cannot lead to macro compatibility of the entire economy. You cannot dream, such as if you let markets do, if you let people do, the society will be better. That means this. That means, in other words, the fallacy of composition. You cannot imagine a society, good society, because you believe that individuals are rational. There is no bridge between micro-rationality and macro-consistency, macro-compatibility, macro-stability. This is a kind of law. This is not a theoretical position. This is a logical law. But liberalism cannot understand this. Why? Because of ideological reasons, not because of scientific reasons. Ideological. So this kind of contagion, which is still in this process of liberalization, makes that we are now in a deep period of crisis, worldwide crisis, in developed economies as well as in emerging markets. Because don't forget, emerging markets deeply depend on emerging markets. The world economy is very interconnected economy. So now the last part, implications for emerging economies, but also implications for all economies of the world. It's not only a problem of transition, of emerging. So the financial development, such as we define it through the liberalization, mainly liberalization, opening up of markets, etc., the regulation, self-regulation, devices dominated economy, etc., etc. This financial development results in increased systemic fragility, in recurrent systemic fragility. So, also at the same time, the question is, how can you imagine that financial liberalization might work in emerging economies when you say, you observe that it didn't work in emerging economies, which are not plagued by persistent structural weaknesses, contrary to emerging economies. If it didn't work in these developed economies, how can you imagine that it will work in emerging markets? It's a very, very crazy situation if you believe that it could work. Just if you are very ideologically engaged in the liberalization, I cannot discuss. Of course, it's a belief. At the scientific level, we cannot imagine that that might work in emerging markets. Then you know that it didn't in emerging markets. So the evolution of capitalist finance, liberalized finance, resulted in this process, resulted in a new accumulation regime, rule, which is not anymore financing of job creating and wealth employment productive activities, but on the contrary, the profitability of securitization transactions, speculative finance, resting on different new instruments, new process, new ways of doing things, etc., in order to generate the huge financial returns. So this transformation may and also makes, it's a long-lasting and ongoing process, economies very fragile, highly financialized, and legally engaged in productive, sustainable activities, generating several bubbles in several decades. It's not only the case of the last ongoing crisis. So also you can add to the difficulties the case of a specific case of emerging market economies, which have a lot of problems of underdevelopment of development process related. So these problems are well discussed, but not concluded in the economic literature, through some opposition between short-run gain or short-run pain and long-run pain or long-run gain, according to your theoretical and political position, of course. So whatever your position, it seems to me obvious that the reforms, national liberalization reforms all around the world have several consequences for different economies. These consequences, first of all, consists in the transformation of productive systems in speculative return-creating systems. And also these transformations make that economies now become really dependent, profoundly dependent, deeply dependent on financial relations and interconnectedness, worldwide interconnectedness. And then when you have some difficulties for one country, you can have consequences immediately in another country because of this interconnectedness. So you have with the deregulation process of the reform, last decade, you have no control, no public control, no macro control over these operations. The BIS tries to create some control mechanism since its first year of existence. That makes several decades or so. And these mechanisms of control rest on this belief in liberal markets. Then the result is whatever the control mechanism, new control mechanism, suggested, created, implemented, today they mainly rest on this belief of free market efficiency. And I can conclude from this that they cannot work to prevent systemic crisis because they rest on the belief that the markets are efficient, deeply, profoundly efficient. Experience of emerging markets, I call it open working transition. So the result is deterioration of financing goods or financing conditions of productive activities that makes, I think, compulsory, necessary. It's really a kind of systemic requirement to create, to imagine. We have to start by imagining things, by changing our beliefs about the working of our economic system, to imagine and to design, to create some macro-prudential mechanisms in order to give economics, but also to the markets, not liberalized free markets, but free markets, because the market, by definition, is a free organization in a capitalist economy. Free market, the chance of doing things in a good way for the entire society, not for 2 or 3 institutions, banks, individuals, etc., because we believe that this kind of working is good for the entire society. This way, we have to live this way. There is no automatic bridge, there is no bridge at all between micro and macro. So we have now to imagine things differently, to accept that things are not as we believe. They are not efficient because we believe in our textbooks that markets work efficient. So if you are talking about the development process, it's obvious that this is a societal process. Social process, societal or societal process, which cannot rest on market mechanisms, which is a public matter, which is in a democratic terms, which is a matter of everybody, of all citizens. That's not the market mechanism which could resolve our social problems. There is no coordination through markets. The first and the last lesson of all these 2 centuries of capitalism is this: there is no market coordination. The market is not a coordination device. The market is a place, way of doing things if you are for free enterprise. But that doesn't mean that markets can organize spontaneously the working of society. So, to finish, maybe in the more empirical words, how and what the developing, emerging economies could, would, whatever the term that he was using, in order to prevent this kind of bad consequences of the working of markets, liberalized markets, and how in a profoundly conflictual world, different economies, nations, can put new development plans to the fore. I think that this is not possible only at national level. And the development process first is a social process, and that must be designed and implemented by the rural society. That's the democratic way of doing things. And the second is that in a globalized world, in an open world, you have to coordinate and cooperate different policies, the design and the implementation, different policies through maybe regional trade agreements and also maybe regional monetary and financial coordination devices. So the two main questions that we ask to finish this brief presentation is that what about these two stages of regional coordination-based development process? Commercial trade coordination and cooperation, and monetary and financial trade, monetary and financial coordination and cooperation. Because the previous presentation talked about some regional financial supervision mechanisms. But I think that all these alternatives cannot rest on the same belief that we have just to coordinate, but we must implement our same beliefs. That means that we remain liberal. We have to liberalize our financial markets as well as our trade relationships, but we have to coordinate it. There is no sense. You cannot coordinate and also try to remain liberal. Liberal means the coordination must rest on the free market mechanics, right? By definition. Okay, there's not a kind of interpretation, that's a definition. Words have one sense, must have one sense, for a good communication between two individuals. Okay? So if you want to coordinate things, rationally speaking, in this case, you have to leave the sleep of free market efficiency. Okay? There is no coordination, there is some discussion. Because you can drink, you can live together among different players from Chile, from Argentina, from Colombia, etc. And come back at home, you continue the same beliefs, you continue the same mechanism to produce recurrent crises, to produce recurrent difficulties at social level as well as economic and political level. So I think that there is no special lesson to draw from the ongoing crisis of the 2007 for emerging market economies. The lesson is general for every economy. We have to leave free market efficiency belief, and we have to engage the whole society in another way of doing our common existence. Thank you very much for your attention, for your resistance.